Hi there, and thanks for joining us for this late edition of ViuTV News. I'm Patrick Fox. Coming up on tonight's show, Legal Aid Department rejects serial government challenges request for judicial reviews. It says he's abused the system. LegCo votes down motion to impeach Chief Executive CY Leung. And Britain is voting. People there head to the polls in what could be a generation-defining election. We'll be live from the UK for more when we return. All right, first up, the Legal Aid Department has rejected a local resident's request seeking legal aid for judicial review for at least the next 3 years. Cheung Chau resident Kwok Chur-kin received a letter from the department saying he's abused the service provided under the legal aid ordinance. Kwok's famous for his record of judicial reviews against the government, including challenging 2 documents submitted to Beijing in 2014, which he argued had made wrong summary of the views on universal suffrage arrangement. He'll appeal the decision and, if rejected, may resort to judicial review once again. Civic Party lawmaker Dennis Kwok says he has faith in the appeal system.
The director is now looking at the appeal filed by Mr. Kwok, and the director's decision would ultimately have to be subject to the scrutiny and review of the courts, and I have full confidence in that system.
Next, little surprise here, but pro-democracy lawmakers have failed to trigger impeachment proceedings against Chief Executive CY Leung. 28 pan-Democrats who accused Leung of a dereliction of duty voted in favour of the motion, but 34 pro-establishment lawmakers were against it. Leung was under fire for secretly asking DAB lawmaker Holden Chow to amend the investigation scope of a LegCo probe into a payment he received from Australian firm UGL. Concluding the debates, Chief Secretary Matthew Cheung told lawmakers to stop their bickering.
It's obvious that there were no grounds to initiate the impeachment proceedings. This debate was all about politics. I sincerely hope lawmakers can put aside these political fights. Before pushing for an impeachment motion, lawmakers should first objectively review the work that's been done by the Chief Executive and his administration.
Now, Cathay Pacific is set to slash about 400 jobs as part of its restructuring plan laid out last month. Together with the firing of around 190 management roles in May, it marks the loss-making company's biggest cut in 2 decades. According to an internal message to staff, the affected positions are non-managerial. The airline says neither crew members nor staff from engineering, human resources, finance and administrative departments will be cut. Cathay's local staff union urged the carrier to pay 3 months of wages to the lowest paid workers affected, more than the usual 1 month's pay. Civic Party lawmaker Jeremy Tam voiced concerns about the company's safety priorities.
Even though this has not affected those working in back office at the moment, it has put a lot of mental pressure on them. When companies are restructuring themselves, maintaining service quality is key, especially for airlines. It is a must to put air safety as the top priority. I hope the carrier will work on it.
Okay, news elsewhere now, and after 7 short weeks of campaigning, millions of British voters are casting their vote today in Prime Minister Theresa May's snap election. Now, the lead held by May's Conservative Party has narrowed down over the past week, and to give us the latest, we have Angeline Ong standing by in London. Angeline, polls seemingly point towards the Tory win, but British pollsters had their fingers burnt pretty hard last time round. How confident do you think Theresa May will be of victory, given the ground Labour seemed to be making on her in the last few weeks?
Well, Patrick, it is certainly true that when Theresa May called this election 7 weeks ago, she was riding around 23 points ahead of Labour in the opinion polls. Cynics might say that was the very reason she decided to call a snap election in the first place. But since then, she's seen that lead slip away. A series of missteps, such as the so-called dementia tax, where older people may have been required to sell their homes in return for care in old age, played very badly on the doorsteps. Her refusal to appear in a lead leaders' TV debate also played poorly with voters. Opinion polls over the last 2 weeks have given her a lead of anything between 12 points and just 1. But the very latest overnight polling suggests things might be looking up. Ipsos Mori giving the Conservatives an 8-point margin over Labour. Now that suggests May would have a majority of 96 seats, up sharply from the working majority of 17 she has had until now, and bigger than any Conservative majority since the days when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister. As you say, though, Patrick, polls are remarkably unpredictable, but there does seem to be a consensus that the Conservatives are comfortably in the lead after those wobbles during the campaign.
All right, well, the election's all about Brexit, but how will Europe and the EU in particular be digesting this election?
Well, of course, Patrick May called this election in order to strengthen her hand in negotiations over Brexit. She based her campaign on the slogan of strong and stable leadership to get the best deal for Britain in the negotiations with Europe. She has repeatedly said she alone could clinch a deal that would give Britain control over immigration while ensuring favourable trading terms. She's portrayed Corbyn as a weak and hapless leader who would flounder in the Brexit negotiations. So the question is, who would the EU rather negotiate with? Well, we know that some in the EU are hoping May does increase her majority. The thinking behind that, the main risk for the bloc is that the Brexit talks collapse. And that would be more easily avoided with a British government that is not vulnerable at home. But others have sought to downplay the impact of the election regardless of the outcome. They suggest it's little more than a domestic political sideshow. Back to you in the studio.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed for that analysis, Angeline Ong there in London. Well, meantime, police in London have arrested 3 more people suspected of being involved in the London bridge attacks. 2 men were picked up on the streets of East London, while the third was detained after a raid on an address nearby. Police say the arrests were made on suspicion of preparation of terrorism offences, while one was arrested on suspicion of drug-related offences. Now, early this morning, North Korea conducted yet another test launch, believed to be land-to-ship missiles this time. This comes a day after South Korea announced it would postpone deploying the remaining parts of the controversial THAAD system. Grace Lee reports.
More missiles fired from North Korea's east coast on Thursday, apparently short-range rockets designed to target enemy ships. It's the latest in the country's fast-paced series of long, medium, and short-range missile tests, and comes less than a week after the UN hit the regime with even more sanctions. Seoul and Washington are monitoring the situation closely.
It looks like they're trying to showcase their variety of missiles and their ability to target vessels ahead of our joint sea exercises with the U.S. Navy.
It's the 4th missile test from Pyongyang since South Korean President Moon Jae-in took office 2 months ago, and comes a day after Seoul announced it will hold off installing the remaining parts of THAAD, the controversial U.S. anti-missile system designed to blow North Korean rockets out of the sky. Officials say the project has been suspended while they assess THAAD's environmental impact, a review that could take well over a year. The decision comes after a probe revealed that the South Korean military hid the rollout of additional launchers from the president, and it's not going to be popular in Washington. The U.S. is urging South Korea to hasten the THAAD deployment, saying its mission is critical to protecting South Korea.
Well, now on the Gulf crisis, the Qatari government said its state news agency was hacked and false statements which fueled a rift with other Arab powers were posted on its website. And U.S. media reports are pointing the finger at Russia. But Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was quick to deny the Kremlin was responsible for the hacking, calling the American news media sources mass disinformation. Reports say the false statements include Qatar's emir cautioning against confronting Iran, as well as defending the Palestinian group Hamas and Hezbollah, a Lebanese Shiite movement allied with Tehran. The hacking revelations come as Qatar struggles with its worst diplomatic crisis in years, with the United Arab Emirates now mulling an economic embargo against Doha. And time now for the latest from the world of business. All right. right, a quick look at the markets first. Shrugging off worries in the West to finish higher. The Hang Seng finished the day up more than 0.33%, pushing through the 26,000-point level. Consumer cyclicals, the big source of growth on the stock index. One of the standout performers was Cathay Pacific. Investors clearly pleased by plans for job cutting there. Shares in the flag carrier finishing up more than 6% today. And new developments on the long drawn-out sale of Toshiba's prize chip business. The company says it's aiming to name a winner for the unit by next week, according to sources familiar with the matter. News comes as a row with one of the bidders of the sale appeared to escalate. Partner Western Digital accuses Toshiba of a serious breach of contract over the joint venture. Together with a Japanese government-linked consortium, Western Digital is in the running to buy out the business, along with US chipmaker Broadcom and tech fund Silver Lake. The global economy is set to grow 3.5% this year before nudging up to 3.6% in 2018. That's according to forecasts by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD. But it still falls disappointingly short of rates seen before the 2008 global financial crisis. The organization said trade and investment flows were supporting the improving economic outlook, but it warned also that barriers in the form of protectionism and regulations needed to be lifted to ensure stronger growth. And ministers from about 70 major economies also signed up to a new tax pact at the OECD gathering in Paris. It's aimed at preventing multinational companies from treaty shopping for jurisdictions most favorable to their tax bills. That's as companies increasingly send cross-border transactions through third countries only to take advantage of their lower taxes. China reported stronger than anticipated exports and imports for May, despite falling commodity prices. Exports rose 8.7% from a year earlier, while imports expanded 14.8%. The figures suggest the economy is holding up better than expected, despite rising lending rates and a cooling property market. Now, iPhone users will probably be familiar with the days-long wait it takes sometimes to get a broken screen fixed. That's because the phone needs to be taken away to an official Apple service facility to be repaired. Now, those long waits could be over, though, after Apple announced it's deploying its machines for mending iPhones to retailers. Fred Katayama with the details.
Apple is in a mood to share. It's installing its super-secret Horizon machines for fixing cracked iPhone screens in about 400 authorized third-party repair centers in 25 countries. The company will roll them all out by the end of the year. The first batch will go to electronics retailer Best Buy. Stephen Nellis covers the story at Reuters.
I think it's a major move for them. So they have kept this capability limited to their stores for security reasons and other reasons for the longest time. But that's made it really hard to get your phone fixed by Apple rather than taking it to a third-party shop. So this is a big move to expand that capability.
Apple protested the right to repair bill from several U.S. states that would force it and other manufacturers to open their tightly controlled repair networks. But it said the legislation was not a factor in its decision to